Welcome back to Inside Story. Let's introduce you to the panel. First up, Communications Exec Nia Meeks.
Good morning.
Good morning. Attorney Christine Flowers.
Hey, Tam.
Good morning. Attorney Jim Eisenhower.
Good morning, Tamla.
And Marketing Exec Brian Tierney.
Good morning.
The mayor talked a little bit about the stop and go, the plexiglass issue. It feels like there are a lot of different dynamics around this. Both are they out of sync with their licenses? They say they're doing one thing, but they're doing something else. And also the culture issue, selling single shots and beers in a neighborhood that doesn't maybe need that. And also the plexiglass, the way it makes the neighborhood feel. Who's right? Cindy Bass, who wants to take the plexiglass down and reestablish rules, or the owners who say we need this in these neighborhoods for our safety? And Nia, I will start with you because you have a personal connection.
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger in West Philadelphia, my family had a variety store, so we had a plain glass window at that time, and we were great neighbors. I can say this. I mean, we had everyone come in, we supported areas, and we were part of a business community. And with all the great things and a clean store and everything, that didn't stop someone from coming in one day with a gun and threatening my mother. And she could have died that day had she not been able to get off and be able to call the police, and that actually spooked the guy and he ran away. So I definitely am empathetic when they say, these business owners, we need the plexiglass for safety issues. But let's go back to the core of this. The core of this is when we were talking about the stop and goes, and I worked on this issue more than a decade ago. We're talking about people who are not adhering to the spirit and letter of the law. You're selling alcohol that's fortified without selling the hot food, without really being more or less a restaurant. And those are some cultural issues that people have had because it draws the wrong kind of crowd, negative crowd. And if you're selling beer and alcohol and other things early in the morning where kids are going back and forth to school, it is abhorrent and it is a negative aspect of your community. So I've seen some shifts. I mean, right now, excuse me, the business owners are saying, yes, we're good with everything about the law except for the plexiglass. I understand where Cindy Bass is coming from with the community. It can be more aesthetically pleasing, truly, but I do believe that bulletproof glass is something that should be a viable option for any business owner who feels they need it.
I agree with you. I think the mayor makes a good point about some of these places selling liquor and only selling liquor and that creating a bad climate. But I just don't see how the government can say to a store owner, you're not allowed to put up something that you feel you need to protect yourself. And if people don't like it, they don't have to patronize the store.
Right. Let's have another question. If this is about the liquor, Cindy says, well, then become a beer distributor.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly.
Why not do that if that's really where the money is? Get out of the game of this.
The business owners don't have a problem. They've said, we don't have a problem with the regulation on the foodstuffs, the alcohol. They do have a problem with not having that option of being able to protect themselves. And I do get where Cindy Bass is coming from. It is a cultural issue. It is off-putting to go into a store when you go in there in good faith and you want to just buy whatever, in the morning, and you have this something like this between you and the
but don't shop
store
there.
owner.
I mean, let the market decide. So
right.
I think the reason Cindy Bass came out with the plexiglass part of it is because that's the controversial thing. That's what gets you the headlines.
Right.
If she said, I have an agreement with the Asian American Merchants Association, and they're now going to serve hot food, only do this, and
but still you get the
it wouldn't have been an
liquor.
issue.
But you know what? There are people in community that hate the plexiglass.
Well, then don't go there. Then what would happen?
You don't have any other options.
Yeah, but if all
we're
of a
not
sudden,
talking about you have a plethora of stores.
what else is
I
sold in these
understand
beer
that, but if all
delis
of a sudden
that
people
take people in
stopped
there?
going to one store because it had plexiglass, and another guy would say, I'm going to take mine down, and he'd do better if it was really, that's what it's about.
But that's if you have options. If you're in a community that does not have options, that if every store is doing the exact same thing, you don't have that option anymore. And trust me, I am not against the plexiglass. I think the plexiglass can work. I do believe it can be more aesthetically pleasing in how it's installed, but I do believe that if you're going to sell these alcoholic beverages, you should be more or less a restaurant. If you're going to be a beer distributor, which I believe actually costs more money to establish.
It costs money
to
to put up the plexiglass, right? So there must be a reason that the store owner does that and is making that investment.
Would
Right?
changing to a restaurant change what people do? Like if there was actually hot food in the bathroom, the person who wants to buy one bottle of malt liquor, would it change what they do?
If you're coming in to buy malt liquor, you're going to come in to buy malt liquor. But if you're establishing yourself as a legitimate restaurant, you're going to have other type of clientele that's coming in here. So you're not just going to have the neighborhood wine.
Exactly. These business owners,
issue?
listen, you understand, and they fear for their safety, and absolutely they should be able to protect themselves. But they're not. I mean, they're not in these businesses for altruistic reasons. They're in these businesses to make money, and so they also owe something to the communities in which they're located. And again, at the beginning I had a problem with the whole idea of not letting people use the plexiglass, but I do get where Cindy Bass is coming from. That messaging, that subliminal messaging, like you're good enough to come in and we'll take your money
I
and
get
we'll
the
get you
subliminal
there.
messaging, but it's not
you're
the
not
role
good
of
enough to
government
come near
decide
us.
that. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's
It would be
not
better if they
messaging and all that stuff, but that's not her job.
Don't sell alcohol from these hours to these hours. That's fine with government. I can
Right.
deal with that.
Yes.
But I mean, with the plexiglass, I think we're all in agreement. This can be a win. I mean, I've seen a cultural shift. Like I said, about 10 years ago, there was just a uproar. Everything was on the table, and everyone was upset. Nobody wanted to move. I've seen the business owners shift in their thinking and say, okay, let's adopt some of these changes. And I also believe that's also because you're seeing second generation people. When you have first generation people who might not have been as trusting, didn't know the neighborhood. Now you have folks who grew up in these same communities, and now they're a little bit more willing to give and take. So take the win and then get rid of the plexiglass provision.
But also think about the communities. We're not talking about Delaware County where I live. We're talking about areas which are high crime areas, and we should be looking at the reason that these are high crime areas as well. It's the plexiglass is not a cure-all for everything.
But it's
But
not
many
always high
people would
crime
say,
areas.
I
No, it's
can't
not
get out of
always
this
high.
area and I shouldn't be made to feel this way just because the neighbor down the road
Right.
wants to stick people up.
Right.
But you have a septic station, you have gas stations, you have many
The
different
shop
types
goes,
of businesses that have plexiglass. So
the
let's
Conshohocken gas stations have it. Yeah.
let's move on to this, which is this abortion bill that is made that looks as though it's going to be passed by the legislature in Harrisburg, but vetoed by Governor Wolf. Many people calling it draconian. There would be strict changes, moving the limitation on abortion from 6 months to 5. They say science says a fetus can now survive, but they also did this. They would change things, no exception for rape, incest, or fetal abnormality. When I looked at this bill, I wonder why they didn't take one or the other. Maybe they could have made an argument on the science, but by putting everything else in there, that seemed to have sent up the
It's
red flags. Why do it this
it's
way?
the single best reason for Tom Wolf to be reelected. And it's going to drive voters to Tom Wolf because he will stand and veto that legislation. And whatever Republican candidate is running, I can't think of a single one of them that would not veto it. That would they let it go forward.
That would be a big deal to get a win on abortion, to move the goalpost back. Why put this other stuff in and get in your way?
Well, Jim sort of like Jim puts his finger on it. This is a political as opposed to this is abortion. Listen, I mean, I'm pro-life Christine down the line. I'm very, very happy when I see legislation coming through that is going to roll back that date when you can have an abortion. But I looked at this particular bill and I read through it, and it is draconian in the sense that there is no exception for fetal abnormalities. There are cases where you have a child, as you indicated before, with a hole in the heart, a child who would not be able to survive. We're not talking about kids who can be, resuscitated through the miracles of science at CHOP right now or something like that. We're talking about children who will not survive. And so it is understandable that people would want that exception. Rape and incest, I have never been in favor of those exceptions because regardless of what people think, if you're going to be consistent on the value of life, you have to look at the fact to say that the genesis of how that life came into creation should not be, it's not the burden of that child. Now, one last thing. Again, this is a political issue, and the reason that it is a political issue is because of the climate now. With Roy Moore, for example, in Alabama, if he gets reelected, he'll get reelected because of this abortion issue. And the whole thing about the sexual offenses will be irrelevant because there are single-issue voters, evangelical Christians, who will vote on
But Brian,
abortion.
what's going on? It feels like abortion, or Nia, it feels like abortion was a big issue for a while, then other issues came to the fore, and now it's coming back. Why in this moment?
Abortion is not a big issue right now, though. I mean, when you look across the board, abortion rates are declining in Pennsylvania and across the country.
Yeah,
So
in
it's-
Alabama, it's going to be the key issue on who goes to
But
the
that's
Senate.
Alabama. We're talking about right here in Pennsylvania. This bill that's for Pennsylvanians, and I get you what you're saying, but this bill is for Pennsylvanians. When you look and you talk, at least in Philadelphia, when you look at it, public safety, education, top two issues.
Right.
This is not
Poverty.
creating.
But then,
this is not
but
creating
then
one
leaders
job.
in Harrisburg must think there's something to this.
I think they
Of course
think
they
that it
do.
really
It's
is a
headlines.
silent dog whistle to
Yes.
your base. And I think you're going into 2018. It's an election year in Pennsylvania, both the House, half the Senate, the governor. And I think what it is that's what it's about. It's a dog whistle, silent dog whistle to your base to try to rile them up on both sides.
But it
But
helps
how
the other
cynical is
side.
that,
But
though?
it
How
helps.
cynical is
But
that?
it helps the
both-
other side.
it
It
helps both
rallies
sides.
the other
Yeah.
side.
does,
It wakes
but-
the sleeping giant.
But it's a waste of time. Again, we need jobs. We're talking about improving education.
Yeah.
We're talking about the quality of life. This is not it. And we can argue about abortion till the cows come home on either side and have good points. The fact of it is, we have laws on the books. We already are working toward making abortion safe and legal. It's already there, and it's declining. That's what everybody wants. No one's running around saying, yes, 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 increase more abortions. That's not the point. The point is that you want to give people options, and every time we come up with another bill
It's a
to limit
campaign.
those
But on the
options.
political
it's
side of
crazy.
it, like as you said, there's going to be a stark choice then for governor, and 40% of the electorate is in the Southeast, and a great percentage of people in the Southeast, particularly women voters, are pro-choice.
But 60% of the voters in the middle of the state and elsewhere will see if indeed the Republicans
But they're not all
are swing-
pro-life.
Yeah, this helps Wolf.
Let's take a look at something that was a bit of drama up in Harrisburg. This was the moment between a Republican, Daryl Metcalf, and Mike Bradford in a hearing, and it kind of went left. Take a look.
Heterosexual. I have a wife. I love my wife. I don't like men, as you might, but don't stop touching me all the time. So like, keep your hands to yourself. Like if you want.
So now Mike Bradford, who you see just kind of like exclaiming, says all he was doing was touching Metcalf's forearm because he said Metcalf kept interrupting him.
This
and
is a
he's trying to say-
post-Harvey Weinstein moment, I guess, isn't it? I mean, this is
Daryl
what we
Metcalf's
have.
Me Too moment,
Yeah,
right?
but-
Yeah, and so the governor has come out and said this is ridiculous. Brian Sims has come out,
Right.
and they've asked Herzai to take Metcalf out off of this board, this committee, which actually oversees gay and lesbian and transgender legislation. Herzai is saying nothing. Is that the right call for him to
No,
say nothing, or
let me
he
tell you,
needs to act on this?
Look, Metcalf is known as some would call in a colloquial a kook, okay? But this doesn't disqualify him, this kind of stupidity, from being on a committee or should be thrown out of the House or be barred from committee. So he's a kook. It must play really well where he's from.
Butler
That part of-
County.
Butler County, they must love it. But the fact of the matter is he's known as a kook, he is a kook, but that doesn't disqualify him. There's a lot of kooks up there.
Part of a long line of his kookiness, we
Yeah.
could definitely say. But as chairing a committee that, first of all, to infer that being a homosexual is somehow a slur was a problem, that right there. And then, he just went above and overboard in this meeting, and everyone's looking like, what, a simple,
laughed.
a simple
Right.
apology.
Yeah.
Well, they laughed, but they had to stop the meeting. And as happens in Harrisburg, when people go really well left or well right, it's like, okay, time out, pause, because we're not getting work done. The fact is, he should apologize. He just went overboard. It wasn't necessary.
But it is outrageous that someone who has these kind of views, obviously he does because he said the things that he said, would be chairing a committee that is supposed to protect gay, lesbian,
This is not
and
the first time
transsexual
he's
rights.
expressed
Oh,
I
he
mean,
has
it's
been.
outrageous.
I mean,
He's
he's
been out of control for a
anti-immigrant.
while.
He has been. This is
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah,
least
yeah.
of his.
This is
problems.
classic
Is
Daryl
this
Metcalf.
smart for Herzai? On one hand, he's got a conservative party, and yet many people have children, spouses, siblings, other people who are gay. They may not agree with it, but they want people to be treated with respect. When they see that, even if they don't agree with homosexual issues, they don't like the way somebody's treated. And younger people, polls show younger Republicans feel differently. Isn't the long view to say you can have your views, but you got to be civil?
Tam, I'll tell you what. If nothing happens to have him removed, I mean, we in Pennsylvania have no basis to start criticizing people down in Alabama because Daryl Metcalf is our Roy Moore, and I love you, Brian, but I disagree. I think he has disqualified himself from being in this position of authority, and the people in Butler County love him, and gerrymandering will guarantee that he will be there until his dying day, not touched by other men. But I don't think he should be in a position of authority in this particular area where you're talking about.
But if
It
you
means
open
that
up
the
a-
work got
issues.
done for the voters that
right,
day.
Right. No, it didn't. But see, if I'm Herzai, if every time somebody in my caucus says something that isn't, that's a bit outrageous, that's kind of kooky, and I allow the other side to say he should be, then nothing will happen. And what will happen is you'll constantly be, and both sides about it. It was all about politics. It would have been better if Brian Sims quietly behind the door said to Herzai, why don't you do something? But when they go public on the other side, the Democrats, and say he must be removed, then they're all playing the same game again.
But
That's
Sims
what it's
and
about.
Metcalf have a long-running feud. They
Yes.
personally
Absolutely
hate,
right.
each,
Hate
other.
each other.
Well, gee, wonder why.
Well, it doesn't look as though this is going to do anything to
patch
make
it
those
up,
men
yeah.
send each other a Christmas card.
There you
All
go.
right. Well,
No.
we had to take a short break, and we'll come right back to Inside Story.